Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Real Estate. I'm David Greene. This is the David Greene Show, and we've got a big, beautiful bill to discuss, as has been talked about for quite a while. President Trump has gotten a tiny victory, 215 to 214 votes in the House to pass the big, beautiful bill. It's headed to the Senate, where it is expected to be revised and then probably passed. And there's a lot of changes in this bill. We're going to cover the preliminary understanding of it before it has been revised, with a focus on how this will relate to the economy and specifically real estate investors. So let's dive into this thing. If this is your first time listening, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already done so, share the video with other people and leave me a comment to let me know what you think about the show, the content, and how this is going to affect the world of real estate. All right, let's talk about the NPR article. Here's what's in the GOP mega bill that has just passed the House. By the way, if you're watching this live, feel free to leave some comments. I do my best to get to those as I'm recording. And as you guys see, there's a free text letter that you can subscribe to with the link realtalkrealestate.com/text-letter. All right, the mega bill. The legislation aims to satisfy competing demands from fiscal hawks looking to reduce the deficit to blue state Republicans looking to lock in more favorable taxes for their constituents. The Thursday vote followed a day of near constant negotiations within the GOP. That stands for the Grand Old Party. That is referring to the Republican Party. The talks included a White House meeting between Trump, Johnson, and several holdouts and skeptics. Trump celebrated the vote in a Thursday morning post on his social media site, Truth Social. Johnson entered the vote needing near unanimous support from his members for the bill to pass. House passage is one step in a lengthy process. Republicans still face more challenges in the Senate, where lawmakers have already signaled reservations about key elements of the plan. The piece of legislation is over 1,000 pages long. Here's a look at some of the key elements inside the latest version. Remember, folks, this can change. All right. So there's an extension of the tax cuts that Trump put in place during his first presidency. There's a call for roughly $3.8 trillion in tax cuts, the bulk of which would come by extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts. These cuts are due to expire at the end of the year, so without an extension, most households would see their taxes go up. That's a pretty big part of the bill. They're keeping in place the extensions or the taxes that we currently have and extending them. This is the one that I've heard everyone talking about the most. No taxes on tips or overtime. The bill includes temporary changes designed to make good on several of Trump's campaign pledges, including no taxes on overtime earned between 2026 and 2028. The plan would also allow Americans to deduct interest on car loans, but only if the car is made in the United States. So on this channel, we've been talking about tariffs, how they're going to affect the price of cars. There's been a lot of unhappy people. And I mentioned that not only will there be tariffs placed on foreign cars, but don't be surprised if you see benefits or credits given to people who buy cars in the U.S. That is exactly what we see right here. And I believe that it's calling for a tax credit on the interest of your car loan up to $10,000 if it's a U.S. made car, and really a U.S. assembled car, I think, is a part of it as well. This is only applicable to people with Social Security numbers. Oh, no, sorry. It would increase the child tax credit to $2,500 until 2028, but only for people with Social Security numbers. After that, it would drop to $2,000 and then increase with inflation. There would also be no taxes on tips. So if you get money as a tip, this is incredible. It shocked me that this went forward. I know Trump was saying that he would do it when he was campaigning. I didn't think that everyone would agree to it. When you receive tips, like when I was a waiter in a restaurant, 90% of my money, maybe more, came from tips. That now becomes a tax-free job for the most part. Some restaurants pay you less than minimum wage because they know you're going to make enough in tips to make up for it. If you've been worried about lack of service at restaurants, people don't want to go back to work, this is going to change things. This is going to put a lot of people looking for jobs that get tips. This is also going to affect real estate sales, because if you live in an area where people primarily get paid in tips, think about places like Las Vegas, where you've got casino dealers. that are making money in tips, where you've got cocktail waitresses, where you've got anybody in the service industry, the restaurant industry, like I said earlier, those people just got a pretty big raise. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see people moving to those areas to take these jobs, as well as people that work in those areas keeping more of their money and spending more of their money. This could lead to a resurgence in the local economies of places like Miami, Las Vegas for sure, Atlantic City, places where tips are very common, parts of Los Angeles. I think you're going to see people getting back to work, which is what I'm really liking. So that's interesting. And then you've got another point here. No taxes on overtime. That blew me away also. I mean, a lot of people that work as first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMT professionals, people that work in the healthcare industry, nurses, anyone in a hospital at all, they have a lot of opportunity for overtime. You're now not going to have that overtime tax, which was where most of my taxes came from, was the overtime I worked when I was in law enforcement. So that would have gone from the overtime I worked being the primary source of my taxes to no taxes. That's massive. So again, think about the areas where these people live. I'm from California. I worked in the Bay Area as a police officer. None of the cops that I worked with lived in the cities where we worked. They all had to live somewhere cheaper and commute in. Those cities tended to draw a lot of first responders. Those areas, I would expect to see a increase in the value for the real estate there, both in rents and prices. I would also expect to see more people applying to get these jobs that have overtime, which means we're going to have a higher quality of person that does the job. It also means that there's going to be more competition to get it. And those professions should be able to buy more expensive homes. So that's going to have a pretty big impact on real estate, maybe more than most of the items in the bill. There's going to be more SALT. This stands for the state and local tax exemption. One of the thorniest issues during negotiations has been the state and local tax deduction, also known as SALT. The deduction is hugely important to a small number of Republican lawmakers from blue states with high taxes, such as California and New York. The 2017 tax cuts capped the SALT deduction at $10,000. The House plan would lift that cap to $40,000 for married couples with incomes that are up to $500,000. My understanding of this is that when you live in a state like I did, like California, you pay a ton in state income taxes. I think it was 13.5% that you'd have to pay. So if you made $1 million, you were paying $135,000 to the state. You were allowed to take a deduction of $10,000 out of that $135,000 so that you didn't have to pay that much to the federal government. That's now getting up to $40,000. So if you live in an area with really high state local taxes, you're going to be getting some relief. That could slow the exodus from some of these states to a degree. I don't know how much it's going to be, but it definitely makes it easier if you're living in a blue state to pay less money to the federal government because you're already paying it to your local municipalities. There's a section in here about work requirements for Medicaid that it basically says if you want to receive Medicaid benefits, you have to be working a certain number of hours. 80 hours per month was the number that I heard. So you can't get Medicaid if you just don't work at all if you're able-bodied. So this is going to put incentive on people that didn't want to work, didn't want to go to the workforce to get back in. Again, there is an emphasis here on kind of lighting a little bit of a spark to the behinds of people that aren't moving, to get them into the workforce, to get them working, to get them productive so that America can start making stuff again, producing things, creating value, and growing our wealth. There's changes to SNAP. The Republican legislation also outlines reforms for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, which benefits more than 40 million low-income Americans. The bill increases the amount that states contribute to the program, and it mandates work requirements for able-bodied SNAP enrollees who don't have dependents. Independent estimates suggest that these changes could result in many people losing coverage. So if you're somebody who has been receiving, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but what we would have typically looked at like food stamps programs like that. We had one in California called EBT, Electronic Benefits Transfer, where you would receive money for food if you were low income, and then people would spend it however they decided to spend it. This bill is going to put more pressure on the state to cover that instead of the federal government. It's also going to require you to work if you're receiving that, if you're able-bodied SNAP enrollees who don't have dependents. So again, you see there's an emphasis here. They're trying to incentivize people to start working. If you're someone who doesn't like working, if you're somebody who knows people that don't like working and you sympathize with them, you're going to be angry about this. If you're somebody who says, I want everybody working in some degree, you're going to be happy about this. It lifts the debt ceiling, which basically stops America from defaulting on its debts by about $4 trillion. It ends brakes for clean energy. This one was pretty contentious. So the Biden administration had given a $7,500 credit if you bought an electronic car or electric car. And it also gave you credits if you invested in renewable energy like solar and wind. Those credits are being ended, and you're going to see that we're now going to be incentivizing stuff like fracking, or I shouldn't say fracking, oil mining and lumber production instead of the clean energy stuff, or so it was called. It beefs up border security. So this puts about $46.5 billion towards completing the border wall. It allots $5 billion for the Customs and Border Protection facilities and more than $6 billion to hire and retain more agents and officers, and increases the upgraded technology for screenings and surveillance of the U.S. borders. Now, the idea here is if you can stop people from coming in the country illegally, you force them to come in legally. You can now be more picky about who comes in and what type of jobs they're coming into work, and ensuring that we have more productivity, as opposed to people coming in that don't necessarily have to be productive if they don't want to. There's a student loan overhaul. This basically changes the way that people who take out loans from the government for college have to pay that back. It simplifies it and gives people less options to get out of paying it back. That was my understanding of it. And that's all that this article has, but there was quite a bit more that it's been interesting as I've been researching this and trying to figure out how do I bring this forward when it comes to real estate investors. There isn't a news article that gives you all the stuff that was in it and the bullet points. They are highlighting the parts that they want you to hear. And it's been very frustrating as I've been trying to figure out what's in this and how do I explain it to people. The no tips and no overtime part was pretty impactful. There's also going to be, as we're going to hear about in a second here, an extension of loan depreciation. So that had gone away. You weren't able to write off like accelerated depreciation on your real estate. I called it loan depreciation. I meant real estate. That's the problem with when you're recording live. It's harder to get things right. And now it's going to be extended, which is really good for real estate investors because you can lower your taxes quite a bit. All right, let's look at a tax article here. Oh, sorry, wrong one there. Make sure I share my screen. This comes from a tax website. Key provisions of the proposed bill. Let's go through here. So as we've mentioned, we've got an extension of the Tax Cuts and the Jobs Act of 2017. This will stop income tax brackets from increasing because that was what we were headed for. There's no proposed change to the corporate tax rate. So if you're taxing your income as a corporation, nothing's changing there. It's not going down. There's an increase in the qualified business income deduction from 20 to 23%. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. The extension of 100% bonus depreciation. This would apply to qualified property acquired and placed in service after January 19th, 2025. There would also be a special bonus depreciation allowance for non-residential real property that is qualified production property. Increased dollar limitations for expensing certain depreciable business assets. So this would be things that, in my understanding of like software that you might buy that's going to depreciate because it's going to become obsolete over time as better softwares are created. There's no proposed changes to carried interest. There's a reinstatement of the depreciation and amortization add back for business interest expenses. If you're a tax nerd, you probably love this stuff, but most people that are listening probably won't. Modification to the tax credit framework under the Inflation Reduction Act, and modifications to low-income housing credits. This provision makes 3 changes to the low housing income tax credit program. First, for 2026 through 2029, the 9% LIHTC is restored to its 2021 level, and so on and so forth. So if you guys want to dig into that, you can look this article up pretty easily if you want to get more information. However, it is pretty clear that we are getting the return of bonus depreciation, which, if you're unfamiliar with what that means, it allows you to take the depreciation that you normally take over small periods of time for real estate that you own up front in the first year or the first couple years. And if you are a real estate professional, you are allowed to take that depreciation and not just shelter the income from the asset itself, but the income that you made from other means that were real estate related. So if you're a real estate agent, if you're a loan officer, if you're working as a property manager and you're making income from that, if you buy real estate and take bonus depreciation, you can shelter the income that you made from the other things. And if you buy enough real estate and do it well, you don't have to pay any taxes. This is what you hear about people like Robert Kiyosaki and Donald Trump himself that said, I don't pay taxes. It's because they bought enough real estate to shelter the money that they made. Now, the downside is you don't get to take the depreciation later in the asset's life. So it's not tax sheltered in the future. This works much better if you made a lot of money outside of real estate investing itself. You made it in other businesses that you had. You can shelter it with the real estate you bought, but you're going to pay the piper later when you've run out of that depreciation because you took it all up front. All right, let's look at some of the comments here. Mr. Vari says, I'm locked in on God. Michael and Haiti said, you have to vote for the bill before you know what's in it. I think that's a reference to, who said that? I can't remember what it was. It was a female politician that said, we'll know what's in the bill after we vote on it. Kelly Rachel said, no tax on OT is pretty cool. Kelly's out there in Las Vegas and she's a realtor, so that's going to be good for her. More of her clients will be able to get pre-approved for higher amounts. Wona says, enough with the laziness. 80 hours per month isn't much to require. That's a good point. Gordon Mack with the top comment so far. You have a big, beautiful head. And he capitalized all of it as if it was the big, beautiful bill. Very nice. My buddy Jeff Holst, I think the bill would probably be a net positive for the U.S., assuming that it passes the Senate, which I think some version of it will. Jeff goes on to say, my big worry is that AI might mean there are no jobs for these people to actually do. I've talked about that on the show many times myself. I share that concern. Completing the wall and general tech increases at the border is a very good thing. Michael said, aren't there caps on no tax on overtime? I would think there would have to be logically. I couldn't find anything that said what the caps were set at. I looked for that specifically. None of the articles that I found showed it. Hopefully that comes out in the future. We could do another video to update you guys there. Jeff said, I've been using GPT to read the bill and summarize it to me, which has helped. Interesting. I didn't think about that. And Wona said, Nancy Pelosi said it. That's the female politician that I was referring to earlier. Yes, she said, we'll know what's in the bill after we pass it, which she was soundly criticized for. All right. What do you guys think about the big, beautiful bill and its impact on real estate? As we've been talking about tariffs up to this point, let me know in the comments. There's been a lot of anger and negativity about tariffs at all because they do make things more expensive. Tariffs, in my perspective, function as a stick. This is something that you use to deter certain behaviors, right? Like think about you're hitting a horse with a stick to try to make it go a different direction. It's painful and it can curb behavior through pain. A lot of the measures that we see in the big, beautiful bill are the carrot, not the stick. They are pleasurable. They are positive. We like them. So what you do when you're trying to craft public policy, because what you're really trying to do is change human behavior. If you're President Trump, if you're more right-leaning, you're going to think about how do we get people in the country productive? How do we get them working? How do we make wealth get created? If you're left-leaning, maybe you personally don't think this, but your party at this point is more towards how do we take the resources from the people that earn them and share them out and give people their fair share and be equitable and so forth. So by taxing people more, that's a stick. That's beating somebody to stop them from working as much. But that allows you to take more of that money and give it to other people. This bill, the stuff that's in there, a lot of it is creating incentives. Now, I couldn't find any of the articles that talked about it, but I have heard that there is opportunity zones that should be coming back. That was something that President Trump put in place to be a carrot. I want people investing in some of the downtrodden communities that get overlooked by wealthy individuals and real estate investors. So I'll give you a tax incentive to go invest in an opportunity zone. That led to a lot of money flooding into some of the inner city areas that typically don't get investment, and businesses moving into there, and improvements in the infrastructure, and an increased tax base, which led to more money to pay for education in schools, and an overall life being flushed into those areas. There's going to be new opportunity zones, and an extension of that. And so what we're seeing here, the tariffs were kind of the first thing that came out that were criticized by a lot of people because they made things expensive during inflation, was there is a curb. We're pushing people away from a certain area, like getting cheap stuff overseas. And now we're starting to see the carrot. We are incentivizing you to come in and do some of the things that we're going to need people to do to get stuff built here. And it's starting with no taxes on overtime and no taxes on tips. I expect that this is going to make a lot of people happy. I don't know how much this is going to affect the stock market, because companies aren't really benefiting from this. These are not corporate benefits. These are more personal benefits. I think it's going to be more of a Main Street than a Wall Street situation so far. And I would not be surprised if this administration has new ideas that continue to come forward to incentivize people to be productive. So if you're someone who's been just frustrated with how hard it is to hire people for your business, this might have made things a little bit easier for you. If you're somebody who works a lot of overtime and is very discouraged by all the taxes that you're paying on it, it's going to put more money in your pocket. Hopefully you can invest that into real estate. You can improve properties. If you have tenants that work overtime or that make money in tips, they just made more money. They're going to be more likely to pay their rent. Now, of course, there's always a trade-off. The downside is this is less revenue coming in for the government itself. My guess would be Trump is looking to make money from the tariffs to offset the money that we're losing from the income that we talked about. It has to come from somewhere. Otherwise, we will run out of money. So I would expect to see, let's see, sum this up here, geographical locations where people make money from overtime and tips, to see more people moving there, increased demand. Increased demand is going to lead to higher rent and higher values. I would expect to see certain professions to have more people moving into them, which is going to be a higher quality of police officer, firefighter, EMT, medical professional, et cetera, because now these jobs can be more picky about who they're hiring. I would expect to see more interest in real estate investing as the bonus depreciation is going to be coming back. And let's see, am I missing anything here from what we covered? Oh, you're going to see more people entering the workforce because they don't want to lose their Medicaid, and they don't want to lose some of the food stamps that they've been getting. They have to work. It's not full time, but they have to do something in order to get those benefits. I think that there's some wisdom in that as well, because people really, really like that stuff. Now, if you want to keep it, you got to do something to earn it. And if we can get more people getting back to working in America, we can become more productive. We can have less dead weight. We can have a higher percentage of our population making money, gaining self-confidence, improving their skills, and ultimately having more self-respect, which I think is a win. But let me know, what do you guys think? Tell me in the comments. Is this a win? Is this not a win? Did this surprise you? And what do you think is going to change as it moves to the Senate? Keep an eye out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications when I'm going live. I'll be doing so in the future to give more updates on what is changing, what's being added, and what information comes to light as we hopefully get ourselves out of this nasty recession that we've fallen into. It's causing a lot of despair and hopelessness across the country. Appreciate you guys for being here and following me. Make sure you head to realtalkrealestate.com/textletter to sign up for a free text letter with news articles in it. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can head to davidgreene24.com and use the chat feature to reach out to me directly. You can also message me on Instagram and let me know if I can help you with financing, real estate, connect you with the real estate agent, whatever your goals are. I'm here for you. I'll see you guys on the next episode.